Starting off great. Yep.
You need to get your own podcast.
Yeah.
It would be canceled very quickly. To be fair, I think, Jake, you've only ever had to edit out one of my jokes.
Yeah, I only had to do one edit on Dan.
And I think you should record all your podcasts right after we record.
Yeah.
Should I do another full Glen Cairn?
Yes.
And then
Yes. Uh-huh.
I can do that.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
And I am Gold Eagle Jake. And we're joined with a pretty special guest tonight, Josh from Single Cask Nation. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on.
Absolutely. We love talking about scotch, don't we, Dan?
We do love talking about scotch, but I will say, Josh, props. I mean, you can tell you do a podcast because you have a perfect podcast voice. Like, I feel like I want to listen to you give a TED Talk.
There you go. I'm in.
Well, not only the voice, but the background. Like, he just took the best of Jake's background, the best of my background, and put it all into one.
Yeah.
So if you're one of our few watchers and not listeners, sure you'll appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So, Single Cask Nation. What are you guys about?
And even to go further back, like, how did this all start? Because you were one of the two that founded it, correct?
Yeah. The idea started in 2010. My partner and I, we each had whiskey blogs at a time when, blogs were just sort of coming about in the later aughts. Maybe they were around earlier, but anyway, I was introduced to blogs in the later aughts, and I was getting into whiskey, and I started my own blog about whiskey, and Jason had the same. I actually learned a lot about whiskey through his blog, and once I started mine, we became friends, and we really hit it off. Similar palates, somewhat similar background, with the exception that he was born in Scotland and is Scottish, and I was born in Connecticut and I'm not Scottish, but in other ways similar backgrounds and sense of humor, and just, we just really hit it off. And right around Thanksgiving time, actually Thanksgiving Day, we connected, and I gave him this idea. I said, between our respective blogs, we get about 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 people per day coming to our blog wanting to know what we think about other people's whiskey to make a buying decision. I don't love my job. I don't know how you feel about your job, but what if we started an independent bottling business? Like, we have people who are interested in our thoughts on whiskey. What if we bottled stuff we fell in love with? And he loved the idea, and he said yes. And it took about 18 months or so just to figure out how to legally bring that idea about. Right? So that was November 2010. We incorporated in 2011. I don't think we released any bottles until the very end of 2012 or the beginning of 2013. So it took about 2.5 years, somewhere around there, for an idea to actually turn into us selling whiskey. So that was the start of it. Please stop me at any time. In that first year, we bottled 3 casks. We bottled, and this was kind of funny. You got to remember, this is 2013, and people were only starting to get into whiskey around that time. I think people were starting to get into scotch in the later aughts, and then into bourbon right around 2013, 2015, around that time frame. And anyway, the first 3 casks we bottled were from the Kilchoman Distillery, Isle of Arran, and Ben Riach. And going out and being 2 guys to first have to tell people what an independent bottler is, like, people didn't even know what that was, then to tell them, so what you have in your glass, Raise your hand if you heard of the Isle of Arran distillery, and not a hand would go up. Right? Raise your hand if you heard of Kilhoman, not a hand would go up. And it would go on and on. And so as two guys who started this, it was a strange time to be doing it. I think we're really lucky in that we started early in a time when whiskey casks didn't cost a lot to purchase, so we could bottle them, establish a fan base to get the money going so we can continue to grow, because, we were just two youngish, dumb guys who never started a business before, and got one going, I think, at the right time. And, here we are 14 years later, and we went from bottling 3 casks in our first year to this year we'll be bottling at least 85.
Wow.
And, we're in 10 countries now, 27 states here in the U.S. And so, yeah, it was just two guys with blogs who just wanted to start some shit. Bottle of whiskey we fall in love with and hope people follow us in the journey.
So that was like the cooler version of let's open a bar. Let's bottle whiskey. I like it.
How did you get in touch and be able to get into some of those distilleries, especially early on in the early days when it wasn't common practice, and a guy from America going over to some Scottish distilleries wanting to get some whiskey to bring over to the States?
I think the blog was the big thing, because, we were getting whiskeys from all of these distilleries that we love, whether it was directly from the distilleries or from the importers of whiskeys from those distilleries. So, like a really good point here is Impex Beverages, who is our importer, who was also my previous employer, started sending us samples. They're the reason that we were able to bottle a cask from Kilhoman. Like, there's no other independent bottling company that has done that and put the Kilhoman name on the bottle. It hasn't happened before. We have them to thank. And we would not have had Arran as well. So yeah, it's the importers, it's the distilleries themselves. They got to know us through the reviews we did, and the entire whiskey industry, at the end of the day, is a bit of a handshake, and it's who you know, and it's it's just that. It really is. It's small. It's a handshake industry, and if they think you're worthy of working with, they'll work with you.
So those first couple of casks, how much of a selection did you have? Because I know you guys are really picky on what you bottle, and make sure it passes through both of your utmost approval. So when you first got into Kilhoman, how was the selection of casks, or did they kind of limit on how much you got to taste?
They did limit us, and I would argue our own finances limited us as well. We couldn't do a big sherry butt that would give us 600 bottles. So we were pretty much focused on bourbon barrels, which would give you 200, 250 bottles, somewhere around there, depending on the age. And so at that time, they were still young. They were built in 2005, so they didn't have a lot of stocks to be sharing. So we basically had our pick of around 4-year-old single casks. And we selected one from the 4, but I think all 4 were definitely bottleable, drinkable. Like, we would have been proud to, open and share that. So it really became a matter of, well, I really like this note that reminds me of spent shotgun shells. We're like, fuck yeah, that's the one. We'll bottle that. So in that case, it was just 4. In the case of the Arran, we went through 6 casks to select one. And with the Ben Riach, that was 18 different cask samples. And part of that is the age of the distillery, right? They're a much more established distillery, a bunch of different ages and cask types to choose from. So they just sent us a plethora, and we selected a 17-year-old peated Benriach from that group.
Did you have any like pushback being like a brand new company, like distilleries being like, we're not going to waste our time? Like,
Oh,
give you
yeah.
guys samples.
Yeah.
Or and to add on to that, was there any one that you really wanted to work with that you just couldn't break through?
There's more of them than there is of another example that where we did break through and didn't think we can break through that I'd love to share. So Glenfarclas Distillery famously does not sell to independent bottlers. And that's been their statement. They don't, except for Cadden Heads, and they only sell cask to Cadden Heads for legal reasons. I won't go into it. You can search the internet for Cadden Heads Glenfarclas legal battle, and it's a story. Anyway, because of the result of that case, Cadden Heads could bottle, but other than that, no one else can. And so we reached out to them and said, look, we want to, we're independent bottlers. And at that time, we were not known as Single Cask Nation. We hadn't bottled stuff from them yet when we first met up with them. We were first called Jewish Single Malt Whiskey Society, which just rolls right off the tongue. And anyway. I'll keep my foreskin joke for myself. Anyway.
Oh, no, those are welcome here. Those are totally welcome here.
And so, at the beginning, especially for the U.S. market, there were a lot of producers that were interested in cracking the Jewish market, right? Which can be difficult because of kosher reasons, so on and so forth. So when we first started our conversation with them, they said no. And then I was going to make a Jewish joke there, but I'm not going to make a Jewish joke there because they didn't say no because we're a Jewish company. They said no because that's their bag. They just don't sell to anybody, right? So anyway, fast forward a few years, and we get a meeting with the Grant family, with George, and we pitched the idea. Like, this is what we mocked up a bottle. We said, this is what the bottle would look like. And it was Single Cask Nation, big word, Glenfarclas, smaller word, and it just said 12 years old, first fill sherry, blah, blah, blah. This is what your whiskey would look like. And then he said, well, could we put our logo where our name is? It could be the same size, but could it be our logo? And we said, wait a second. If we said yes to that, are we A, independently bottling a Glenfarclas, and B, looking as if we're collaborating with them on the first ever independent bottling of their whiskey? Look, it was an instant hell yes. And so 5 years later, we finally bottled it. That's how long the process took. But we did finally make it happen.
Why
That was
did
a
it?
one and done.
I mean, is there a reason why it took that long?
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Is it like
Let's
legal
just-
reasons, or were they just kind of dragging their feet with the whole?
No, it wasn't on the Glenfarclas side. Let me leave it there. It wasn't on the Glenfarclas. It wasn't on the Glenfarclas side or the Single Cask Nation side. I'll leave it there.
I know where the middle link in that chain is coming from then.
And then one other one I want to throw out there too, which we're really proud of, is bottling wild turkey, which unfortunately is not something anyone is doing at the moment. They sort of pulled back on that. But for 8 years, we were the only independent bottler of wild turkey, putting the name on it, treating it like an independent bottling. And that took a lot of work. That took, back to, your question, Dan, why would people say yes to you? It's just knowing the right people and just working on them and trying to prove our worth and, just trying to show that we're good guys, trying to do good things with whiskey. And we finally convinced people with the help of a lot of people.
has it come full circle now where you actually have some of the distilleries reaching out to you guys trying to get in your bottlings and have their label or their name on your bottles? Or is it still kind of a sludge through the mud?
No, mostly American distilleries are reaching out. You know, not like the Buffalo Traces and Heaven Hills
crafts.
of the world, but
Right.
craft distilleries for sure. American single malt producers as well. We work with a number of them, like Virginia Distillery, Westland, Westward, Copperworks, and so on. But as far as Scotland goes, that really isn't a thing. You know, I mentioned that year one was us bottling 3 casks, and this year we're bottling 85. Part of that is because last year we joined a larger corporation, a company called Artisanal Spirits Company, which is also the parent company of Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, if you're familiar. Anyway, because we're now part of that group, we went from having 100 casks of Scotch whiskey in our warehouse to having around 17,000 casks of Scotch whiskey in our warehouse. So, and that comes from a multitude of distilleries, and that's stock that's built up over the past 40 years or so. So when it comes to Scotch whiskey, that doesn't really play so much because you've got a much smaller pool of Scottish distilleries, and they're already doing their thing, the thing that they have been doing for the past few hundred years. So it's just a different ball game.
So what percentage would you say you bottle American whiskey versus Scotch whiskey, and if you know off the top of your head, like even American single malt versus bourbon versus Scotch?
Well, I think of the 85, I think there's going to be 10 American whiskeys, and it'll be a mix of bourbon, rye, and American single malt. But we're also doing a blending project that I can't say too much about, but that'll be sort of a larger output if we end up doing that, and that will be there may be some American in that. So I don't know if I can put a percentage on that, like 10 of 85 plus so I don't know.
That's
8%.
Whatever,
let's call it 8-ish%.
10 out of 85 casts is good enough. I just wasn't sure. Do you think you've kind of stayed with that similar-ish percentage, or has it shifted more American than when you started and what you thought? Or how has that kind of evolved over the last 14 years?
Well, we set out to be a Scotch whiskey independent bottler, first and foremost. And so we'll always have that be like a good, at least 80% of our business. We started bottling in 2012 and peppered it throughout. Not 2012, I'm sorry, 2014 American whiskey. I don't know. My guess is it'll probably stay around 10-15% of our overall output per year.
So the bourbon boom last couple of years didn't make you guys want to jump into some more American whiskey?
I would argue we felt it burst in front of our eyes while we released some whiskey. Like, I don't think the burble bubble, the bourbon bubble has burst. Say that 3 times really fast. Obviously, I can't say it one time slowly. But, it was really interesting. We grew a bit with with bourbon as it was growing. We released some Heaven Hill. We released some Turkey, and then some other smaller distilleries. And then right in 2023, we released a 7-year-old Black Button bourbon, which I understand is a craft distillery, but I think it was maybe 118 bottles, like a small output. Earlier in 2014, guys, again, why did you have me on this podcast? In 2024, we bottled a Wilderness Trail Rye, and we bottled a few other American whiskeys, bourbons. and they just didn't sell out the way that it used to.
Mm-hmm.
And across COVID, I think one of the things that people could complain the most about us is that everything that we put online would sell out immediately. And so I just saw a general bubble, maybe a balloon, start to inflate when it comes to whiskey. Bourbon, I think, took a bigger hit, at least from our own perspective, and malt is just a little behind that.
You're making Dan real happy right now.
You're not making me happy at all. Like, I've just been on the... I don't think it's burst either. My thing has been it's peaked and it's falling down a little bit. I don't think it's going to be like a housing market burst where no one's going to buy whiskey anymore. I feel that the downswing has started. It's going to fall for a little bit and then level off. But I think we've hit past the peak for a while. That's one of the questions I was going to ask you, to see what you guys are doing. See if you've been seeing the markets change. How have you guys been reacting? And then with all the scotch that you do, is there any concern with possible tariffs and things coming up?
Yes. I'll start with the tariffs one first because I forgot the first one by the time we got to that. So let's start with tariffs. We are scared about the tariffs. It didn't help whiskey or wine the first time around. It didn't help whiskey coming in. It didn't help whiskey going out either for American producers. It's the people that pay the tariffs are the importers who then pass it on to everybody else, and then it's us who simply want to drink.
Yep.
So, I don't think that they're going to be good for business. I don't think they're going to be good for consumers. I just hope they don't return. My understanding, and sometimes my understanding is off, is if the current agreement is not touched, the pause on the tariffs would last through to the end of 2026. That would be the end of 5 years. And then 2027, it can be renewed. But that's just this one, right?
Right.
It can be changed, and we'll see what happens, and I hope it doesn't.
Well, so how does that affect you? I thought from our earlier conversation, you mentioned you had a warehouse in the United States. Does that...
because all Scotch whiskey is imported.
But even if you take the barrels over here...
And it's not Scotch whiskey.
And then bottle it. Okay.
Yeah, so part of the laws, there's sort of three simple not three simple rules, but three stipulations to call Scotch whiskey, and it's put on every bottle. It says distilled, matured, and bottled in Scotland. So we could take those casks out. We can bottle it here in the U.S. Of course, that would have to come before, whatever date the tariffs would be restarted, even if it was still in cask. But we couldn't say Scotch whiskey on it. We could say malt whiskey from Scotland, but to my mind, that's like saying, that's like making a bourbon mash bill and distilling it into a used cask, and to only be able to use the term whiskey from a bourbon mash, which is simply not as sexy as bourbon.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, so it's nothing that I don't think anyone would want to do. So we would have to bottle it in Scotland. So, if we see it coming down the pipe, I think something that we have in our favor is that we have our own bottling hall with our warehouse attached to it and all of our dry goods. And we know all of the bottles, all of the casks we want bottled this year. So if we need to, we can flood the schedule, bottle this stuff up, throw it onto a ship, get it over here before things start. So at least we can get ahead of the game. Any product that's here prior to the start of a tariff is free from having to pay tariffs on that product. So we can pat ourselves a bit.
Makes sense. And then, so did you have a warehouse here as well?
We do. Yeah, we've got a warehouse in California.
And it pretty much holds your American whiskey then?
Yeah, just American. Yeah. And Dan, I'm sorry, can you go back to your first question?
Oh, yeah. So I guess kind of what are you doing, seeing that the market's kind of topped out, to make sure that you guys are going to continue to have success going forward as we start to see? I mean, I've seen a few places that are already putting up 2-year-old, 3-year-old MGP barrel lots in pretty big succession. And they're not moving, which is a little scary on the distillery side or the bottling side.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing to prep for that? You guys, I guess, what are the biggest concerns that you guys are having on that front as well?
Well, there's a few things that we're looking to do. I mean, the good news is everything we do is single cask. And we're only in 26 states right now. So if we can expand the number of states that we're in, that'll allow us to spread the liquid a little broader, so we can, get it onto shelves and off of shelves a bit quicker if possible. The other thing as well is we're looking real sharp at our pricing. We're really lucky. I mentioned before, a lot of the casks that are in our warehouses now are casks that have been building up over 40 years. So a lot of that liquid had a much lower cost to it initially, which is going to allow us to bring our prices down. So when we first started, 14 years ago, the rule of thumb was for independently bottled whiskey, the fair price was $10 per year. And when I say independently bottled whiskey, again, I'm always going to use Scotch as the signpost. But $10 per year was fair. And as whiskey got more popular, that crept up, and we were getting to $12 per year as a base. And if you're looking at a fancy distillery name, well, that changes considerably. We're getting back to $10 per year. We have the wiggle room to do that. So we're going to get back to better pricing. We're going to look to expand our reach nationally and expand our reach globally as well. So we have the liquid, we have to bottle it, we have to sell it. We're a publicly traded company now, or we're part of a publicly traded company, so we have numbers that we have to hit. While, so we know how to select them. It's a matter of getting that to new places.
So to expand a little bit on that, what is your selection process? Is there anything that you guys are looking for specifically? And then, if we could, from there, talk about the samples that we've got.
Please, yeah, cool. So, so the process, from simply a tasting standpoint, not a planning standpoint. And by planning, I mean okay, what are we going to bottle this year that's different from last year, right? We always want to make it different. We're bottling single cask. That's the goal. Always do something different. So not from that standpoint, but from a actual selection standpoint, we bottle everything at full strength. So we want to make sure whatever we're tasting, we're not diluting initially. And it's really simple. Get a proper whiskey glass, put about that much whiskey in. That's probably maybe a half an ounce, if that, maybe a quarter ounce, half ounce. And we nose all of the whiskeys. And if any of those whiskeys are uninteresting, we won't waste our taste buds on them. We just put them to the side to enjoy later. If they're interesting enough, then we go in for texture. So, excuse me. Normally, people would say, well, then we go to taste it. A whiskey can taste really great, but if it has a thin mouthfeel, if it's just hot, burns your palate, then why bother, right? It's it makes for a bad whiskey. So the first thing we pay attention to is the texture. We ignore the taste, the flavor of it if we can, which is sometimes really hard if you've got, a peaty whiskey or just a kick-ass weeded bourbon, or whatever it is. Just it's hard to do, but you try to focus on the texture. If the texture is good, then you focus on the flavor and how the nose to palate to finish flows. And then we think, this is the most important part, would we reach for this? If someone came to our house, would we be proud to show this? Would we want to say, check this out? And also, would we open our wallets for it? That's a big one too. So that's our selection process. Would we reach for it? Would we want to share it? And would we spend the money for it?
So when you say interesting, can you elaborate on that? Like, are you looking for like things that are off profile
from a distillery, or
sometimes.
or just like something that's like kind of like punching you in the face? That's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, Or
I mean, it's kind of yes to all of that. Like sometimes I want that. Excuse me. Sometimes I want that whiskey to highlight exactly what we think that distillery does best, and also what we think the distillery thinks they do best. Right? Mm-hmm. Right. If you're Wild Turkey and 101 is your calling card, well, if the cask you pick isn't at least within that wheelhouse and then better, then you have a problem. But then sometimes we want something that's way off of flavor profile that, notes you simply wouldn't find in that whiskey. And sometimes you get that because, like there's a cask type that distillery normally doesn't use, or whatever reason, whatever that difference is, sometimes we do that. Having said that, even if it is like different from that distillery's standard bottlings, we still want it to taste like that distillery. Mm-hmm. Like we're whiskey geeks, and we love the whiskey that comes from each distillery because that distillery produces really good spirit. And so if you have like, a delicate whiskey that's flooded with an overactive sherry cask, it may end up being a great whiskey. But if that distillery's character is not even recognizable, then I don't think we're doing that distillery a favor, especially if we're putting their name on the label.
Right.
So can it be the best of what the distillery does? Yes. Can it be off profile? Yes. Does it need to be noticeable that it's that distillery? 100%.
See, that's what I appreciate, is that you're not. There's so many independent bottlers out there that are just trying to pass off a label. This is whiskey. We're not going to talk about that we didn't do anything with this. We're not going to give anyone kudos for being the ones that produce this good juice. I do like the fact that you guys are upfront about everything and kind of doing this as a compliment to what the distillery is doing. It's a different way of getting it out, because a lot of times you're not going to be able to get single barrels very easily from these distilleries, so it gives people another way to access it and see the difference between a single barrel versus a big batch.
Yeah, and there've been a number of people who've come to us and say, like, I ignored Wild Turkey because I had a horrible experience with them, back when I was in college or whatever, and here I am 30 years later, and you've shown me that Wild Turkey actually makes good bourbon. Or I ignored, or I'd never had Westland before. You guys showed me my first Westland, and now these people buy from that distillery. Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of important to us. So we always want to make sure we're doing right by the distillery. Whether we buy from them or not, we always want to make sure we're doing that, because people can buy from us, but they need to buy from the distillery too. Because if those distilleries go away, well, we go away. So, yeah we need everybody to survive.
Yeah, it's, a win for everybody, right? And like, it is kind of a, like Dan was alluding to, it's a breath of fresh air in a very opaque, market to get some transparency.
I've got one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we dive into the whiskeys. So just, you said you were in 10 countries. We kind of talked a little bit about how bourbon boomed here a couple years ago, and now it's kind of peaking off a little bit. How is the industry going for other countries? Did they see a boom with COVID like we did, and has it started to slow down, or what have you noticed there? And if you want to just focus on Scotland.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing, we're all in the same boat. Like, every country's dealing with this. I think a number of things happened, but I think the largest contributor to the whiskey industry, or really the spirits and wine industries as well, right? Wine is down, beer is down. I think wine and beer is a different story, so let me just stick to spirits, and I'll stop getting ahead of myself.
Oh, you're good.
Is the fact that we were home for however long, doing nothing but buying all of the things, because we couldn't spend our money on any of the other things. Couldn't go on vacation. You know, who needs this credit card anyway? I'm gonna max it out. You know, you had nothing to do except for find a hobby, or just get bored real quick. So everybody bought all the things. And so what people need to do now is start drinking the things that they bought, start paying back their credit cards, continue going on vacations with your family, but drink that stuff down so you can start buying whiskey again. I think, and Dan, I think you may have mentioned it before. I think it was you, but I don't think people's interest in whiskey hasn't waned at all. It's just, my shelves are full, right? Jake's shelves are full. No,
I was going to
space
say, I
there
don't
for
know.
some Single Cask Nation
I don't know
bottlings
anything
for you,
about
Jake.
overbuying and
He's got
This is one of his whiskey rooms.
Yes, this is
there
one of
you
the three, and the floor you also can't see is just covered. So
No, I
There you
cleaned
go.
that up.
Oh,
They're all in
okay.
the closet now.
Right? So yeah. So, you know, and I would argue, and Jake, you may say the same, because I'm in a similar thing. You haven't seen my basement or my garage or many closets. I've slowed down my own personal purchasing, and it's not because, well, it's mainly because I have a kid who I'm putting into college, and I've got another one that's going into college in 2 years as well. So that's the big reason for it. But you know, a lot of people are slowing down. So I think we need to get together more, right? COVID's done. Get together more, open more bottles, make that happen. Make it a rye January. Right?
Hey,
Yeah,
that's what we're
rye
doing.
January.
We just had a blind rye January tasting last night.
That's
Yeah, I know
fantastic.
for me the biggest thing was just the realization that even if I become like a dedicated alcoholic, I'll never be able to finish all of this. So
Right.
I have to share it, or else
Try
it's
as you
just
may.
gonna sit here. So yeah, I'm trying to get rid of it any way I can.
Hopefully your kids like whiskey someday.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Going into
right
college
now,
with all this booze around.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So
Okay.
why don't you give us a little rundown? What are some of the things we're drinking tonight? I will say that I am not a Scotch guy, and I have not finished, or I have not thought about dumping anything I've tried. It's all been pretty darn good so
Okay.
far.
Yeah, so
that's
let me just
good to hear.
real quick. I met Josh 2 months ago. Came in
Yeah.
with Impex Beverage, and I really don't say this often, and I don't think this often, but this was one of the few times where I think everything you pulled out to taste was awesome. Not even just palatable, but everything stood out. Everything was great. So
Thank you.
yeah, I do think, and these were my picks out of what we tasted. So I hope you guys enjoy them.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that. So you guys have 5 bottles in front of you, and the first two are as un-anti-Single Cask Nation as Single Cask Nation can get, because each of them is a marriage of 6 casks. So these are like 6 cask nations, or whatever the Latinish word for 6 happens to be. Sex?
I was going to say sex, but I also have an awful mind, so.
So these are two sexy whiskeys. So these are bottlings that we call Wolf Island. And the wolf in Wolf Island stands for Water of Life Film, which you may, I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it, or if your listeners have seen it or heard of it, but it's a movie or a documentary about the craft and history of Scotch whiskey production. It's really well done.
Awesome film.
And the director and producers of the movie we were friends with, and they asked us to collaborate, or we asked if we could collaborate, I should say, and they said yes. So we did a single cask for them, and then we did these two bottlings. And so what these are, each of them are different. There's Wolf Island and then Wolf Island Take 2. And each of them are a marriage of 6 casks of single malt from the same distillery. Each of them have 5 casks that are 7 years old, unpeated, in a first fill bourbon. The 6th cask is 9 years old, moderately peated. I can't tell you the exact parts per million because I'm not allowed to tell the distillery. And that, my friends, would be a hint, and I can't even hint about it. And so 9 years old, light to moderately peated, also first fill bourbon. So the idea was this distillery has a naturally sort of fruity characteristic to it, a slight salinity to it, like just a touch of a saltiness. And we wanted to just add a slight element of smoke just to balance out the intense fruitiness, because it really is a fruity whiskey. And to give people who dig peated whiskeys an opportunity to enjoy some peat. And I would argue it's low enough in the peating level that hopefully those that are a little curious about peat, maybe have been turned off to it in the past, this might be the foot in the door for them. So 6 casks of whiskey all married together. The other thing is it's not bottled at cask strength. It's bottled at 48.8% alcohol, which just seemed like a good drinking strength to us. And the reason we did that is this was a pretty large documentary to be released. I think when it came out on PBS, there was 2 million viewers for it, or 2 million viewers watching it. And so we wanted something that was low enough in ABV, but rich enough in flavor and texture that even the more pedestrian of whiskey drinkers can deal with the ABV, and the more experienced whiskey drinkers should be okay with 48.8. Like, that's still a pretty solid ABV. So we just wanted to make a Goldilocks whiskey.
Yeah, I could tell on the back end. I got the peat on the back end of it. It's nothing that you really easily pick up the nose if you're not used to it.
Yeah.
I didn't could get some of the little bit of what the iodine people say that comes with peat and things. Very little, just a hint of it.
Yep.
But not. It's not one that's you're gonna take a whiff of and be like, oh, this is definitely peated. I can't drink this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice to hear. And do you normally, being someone who isn't a Scotch guy, is part of that because you don't like peated whiskeys, or are you sometimes okay with peated whiskeys?
I don't. I very rarely drink peated. I'm usually more Speyside if I do anything Scotch. Speyside, sherry fill, cask is usually where I fall.
Dan's got a sweet tooth.
I got a sweet tooth, but Glenfarclas, Glenmurray, like those are the ones I usually gravitate towards. So.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
So, you didn't tell me who distilled it when we were just sitting there not being recorded, so I know you're not going to say it now. Can I speculate again?
You can. Let me add in one last thing so if your listeners want to speculate as well. It's Wolf Island, so the other clue is that this distillery is on an island.
You're just erring on the side of caution that you don't want to give away anything, correct?
I'm going to keep silent here. Go ahead and speculate.
Well,
I've been working on my poker face. So.
I don't. I can't be too sure, but if you've seen the film, it's all about Bruichladdich Distillery. and this certainly tastes like it could be.
Okay. Yeah, we've heard that before.
I'm sure you have. I could be way off because that would be the obvious choice because the film is about there, but then why wouldn't you use their casks if you're putting together a blend, for this documentary? But
Yeah.
I won't put too much pressure on you. Don't worry. It's 5 casks of Classic Lottie, 1 cask of Octomore. Boom.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that was awesome. So
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I've tried both of them already. They're like, as you would expect, very different. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, there's still like that identifiable characteristic that really like that in both of them that carries through. It's like that really nice fruitiness, and then there's like other things layered on top of it. But yeah, I get that like saltiness, and it's much more like a sea salt on batch 1
Definitely.
than I do on batch 2, which is also really, really nice. Reminds me of like a very, very well balanced like berry cobbler type thing or something.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Oh, you're getting berry. You say you're getting berry notes in it?
Yeah, but like, I don't know if
Because
it's
someone else got that recently too, and I'd never saw that before. And as soon as he pointed out, it was like a blueberry kind of thing. and
Yeah, it's
I'd
like
never
really,
gotten a
really
blueberry.
like bright,
Yeah.
like
okay.
berry notes. Like,
It makes sense he would have that because he doesn't know how to taste whiskey.
yeah,
He's usually pretty clueless on it, so that would make sense.
It's
I get
kind of like a
um,
creme brulee with like a couple berries on top. Like it's
Oh, I like that.
it's
Dolce de
very
leche. Dolce
very
de leche.
very creamy. You still get a lot of vanilla. You definitely get the salinity and a little bit of fruits.
yeah,
But yeah,
and
super
like,
tasty.
almost like pear too. It's not like quite apple,
Okay.
but it's kind of got that like
for sure.
another like tree fruit kind of taste
Which-
in there.
Which totally makes sense, not just for this distillery, but like in Scotch whiskey in general. If you taste some of those whiskeys really young, actually, if you taste the new make, and maybe you guys have, and I apologize if I'm saying something you guys already know, but like the predominant note in distilled malt is pear.
Mm,
And
okay.
and I love that note with some distilleries really carries on, and I would argue with this distillery in particular, like one of the things I love about one of its age statements, and I'm not going to say which, is that note still came through. So yeah, I'm glad you found that pear note. That's awesome.
Nice. All right, next
Both
up.
of the yes, of course. But first, both of these whiskeys are available at Gold Eagle, if you're interested. Pricing $79.99 on batch 2, $89.99 on batch 1. And if you stay with us through the episode, maybe there's gonna be a coupon code that drops.
Ooh.
Okay, good.
Very nice.
Your phone's gonna be sending you notifications.
Remember how he just said he can't drink everything he has? It doesn't stop him from buying more. I just can't wait for the intervention day that we have with you, Jake. Like
So
when
this-
your wife texts me and she's like, we need you to keep Jake out of the house for a little bit because we're assembling a crew.
But Jake is my dealer, so he's not gonna come.
No, I'll send some party
Drew.
favors.
Send Drew. So some of the higher age statement stuff. I've had 2 of the 3 so far.
Same.
I am just going to start off by saying the 16-year slaps.
Ah, nice.
Oh, that's supposed to be the last one.
No,
Yeah,
Yeah.
16 years the last one.
no. Well,
Jeez, Dan.
jumped the gun, but I'm glad I did.
Well, let's talk about the one that I can't pronounce. 18-year first.
Oh, give it a try.
I really like this one. It's excellent.
How do you say it?
Strathclyde?
Yeah.
No, oh, the 18-year-old, not the
Yeah.
16, the 18-year-old. Yeah, no, you nailed it. Strathclyde. It's perfect.
Okay.
So Strathclyde is single grain Scotch whiskey rather than single malt Scotch whiskey. So the difference being is how they distill it. It's not necessarily the grain. You could use 100% malted barley and put it through a column still like we do here for bourbon. And that legally has to be called single grain Scotch whiskey. However, in the case of the Strathclyde, it's about 90% corn and 10% malted barley in the mash. And let me just take a look at the label. I need reminding. Yeah, okay. So it spent 15 years of its life in a used bourbon barrel, probably a second or third fill, right? Meaning that it's given up a lot of flavor. You know, that cask really isn't doing much heavy lifting at all. And then for the final 2.5, 3 years of its life, it was put in an American oak STR cask. So a American oak cask that had been used to mature wine, but then was shaved, toasted, and recharred. So you're getting some of that barrel char coming through. So if you're getting bourbony notes, then that's spot on. You've got corn in the mash bill, and you've got charred oak. But there's some sweeter, fruitier notes in there that, you know, some of that wine is left over during that shave, toast, rechar process. So if you're getting some, like, wine fruitiness, that could be where that's coming from.
Yeah, I was going to say this one's much closer in flavor profile to bourbon, you know, than a typical Scotch.
Absolutely.
And definitely had a very like light finish kind of note to it. So the STR definitely makes sense. Yeah, and it's excellent. It's like really robust and flavorful, but it's not like it's not too rich. So it's you can drink a bit of it before you get tired of it.
Yeah, this one really blew me away, and it is a category that we really try to avoid bringing in just because there's such a lack of knowledge with single grain whiskeys. People are just so afraid of what they don't know or understand. But I mean, tasting it, and it's $130 for an 18-year that tastes like a very well-aged bourbon, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the exact proof. Do you know the proof on
59.9?
59.9, yeah. So it's full-bodied, tons of flavor, all your like caramel and vanilla notes that you look for in a bourbon, but with some added like fruit complexity, and then you definitely get that charred oak from that STR cask at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think single grain whiskey, like, I mean, hopefully, let me make sure I'm saying this right. You know, whiskey prices have gone up across the board, and maybe they'll start flattening, maybe they'll be coming down in places. Like, we honestly don't know what things are going to look like, but one thing that's held true when it comes to Scotch whiskey is single grain has always been the bargain. Like, if we're back to the rule of thumb for an independent bottler that $10 per year is a proper price, then this should be $180, not $130, right? So you have it for $130. It's single grain. Back to your point, category people don't know. But people who discover it and go down that rabbit hole, there's a lot to be discovered. There's a lot of great flavor there, and I really appreciate like your notes there.
Corn whiskey to bourbon.
Kind of, yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, delicious.
Yeah, cheers.
Delicious. Cheers.
And there's always, you don't have viewers, you just have listeners?
We have like 3 viewers.
Okay, so Tom,
we do all of
have
this
like
for 3 people.
25 viewers. Come on.
So this is something.
Oh yes, you should definitely talk about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like, as far as our labels go, we want to give people as much information as possible. Age, when it was distilled, when it was bottled, if there was a finishing cask, how long was it in there? Was it 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever? But then we also have really truncated tasting notes, like on this one we're tasting right now, waxy, warm grain, and candied fruits. That's what we put down. And then below that is what we lovingly call our flavometer. And it's it's like an 8 flavor system on a scale from 1 to 10 of where those flavors lie. So it's floral, sweet, rich, nutty, spicy, earthy, smoky, oaky. And so if you don't know that distillery, it gives you an idea of where those flavors are. And so, Jake, and not Jake, but Jake, you said before that, when I came to taste you at the store, that you liked all of the whiskeys that I showed you.
Yeah.
I think part of that is not just that they're good. I agree with you that they were very good, but I think our palates align, right? Like what you like, I like, because I'm bottling the stuff I fall in love with, and that Jason and I fall in love with, or our person I forgot to mention, Jess Lomas, who is our global sales manager in Glasgow, the whiskey she falls in love with. My point is, if you find a number of bottlings from an independent bottler, whether it's Single Cask Nation or Impex Collection or Cadheads or whomever, then you found that your palate aligns with that bottler. And if you haven't heard of that distillery, well, we're giving you clues. Clue number 1 is you tend to like the whiskeys we've bottled, so you have a little bit of trust there. And B, here's a flavometer. That tells you where those flavors are going to lie. So hopefully it helps people make a buying decision when they're they want to discover new bottling, but they're a bit apprehensive. So that's why we design our labels the way we design them.
Yeah, I love that.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
And the transparency is great. It's always nice to get that information, even if it's just for the sake of being a whiskey nerd and being able to see all that data about that whiskey. But I won't go into a rant about transparency, but there's no reason to be untransparent anymore, especially for independent bottlers and craft distilleries and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's tons of more transparency from independent bottlers, and they're probably the ones that can't give out all the information.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously you need to kind of earn people's trust and let them know what's in that bottle as much as you can. But yeah, it's really cool to see all those different, when it was bottled, when it was distilled, what casks, everything that whiskey went through in its lifetime. And then the flavometer, that is a cool touch.
Yeah.
I think Jake, your point about transparency, if you'll indulge me, is the perfect segue into the next whiskey.
Perfect.
Let's hear it.
Because we couldn't put the distillery name on this label. So it says Black's Boat Bridge, and it's a 13-year-old. The whiskey spent its first 8 years in a first fill bourbon barrel, and then was transferred into a first fill Spanish oak Oloroso sherry hogshead. So 8 years and 5 years, 57.3% alcohol. Here are the hints that I can give you. With this one, I can hint. With Wolf Island, I couldn't even hint. So, if you... it's a Speyside distillery. If you went to the Google machine and went to Google Maps and just searched Black's Boat Bridge, Speyside, it would get you to a bridge that crosses the River Spey, and there's 2 distilleries that it's close to, and it's closer to one distillery than the other. The distillery manager, you'd have to know the distillery manager to know the story, but he drives over Black's Boat Bridge every day to get to work. Here's the other hint that I'll give. I'll give 2 more hints. Dan, you said you love this distillery. And then I also mentioned we were one of the only independent bottlers to ever bottle whiskey from this distillery and use their name. And that was a one-time deal.
Yes.
If you have a short-term memory, if you have a short-term memory, go back to about the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure out at that point, then Jesus Christ, why are you listening to us in the first place? Like, listen to Baby Shark or something instead.
Yeah, this one's really good as well. It's same like robust flavor. It's got a great mouthfeel.
And maybe
Again, like not heavy-handed finish. It's like very well balanced.
yeah, it's very well balanced and it's bold. Like you get a lot of the
Yeah.
flavor.
Yeah.
Much more so than I remember tasting other things from this distillery.
Yeah, this was an example where we wanted to have a cask that really represented what we thought the distillery does best, which is just big on sherry, just a full-on experience, and it is just that. We have bottled 2 other casks from this distillery that's all fresh bourbon cask matured, no sherry at all. And that's where we're sort of, zigging while they zag. We're just trying to do something that's off their standard profile. But what's cool, and this was some of the first time me and Jason experiencing this, what's cool is the distillery character is the same in the bourbon cask matured as it is in the sherry cask matured. So my fear was that what I love about this distillery is the great sherry casks that they use. And it's just all good because, yes, the spirit may be good, but the casks are really good. I was really psyched to see that the distillery character was present and robust in those bourbon casks as well. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox with this distillery.
At the very end, I'm getting like a nice dark chocolate on the exhale after I take a sip, like deep down, and it makes me happy.
Oh, I like that.
Just a little bit of the breathe out and get some of that chocolate note to it.
Well, the 3 tasting notes on here are chocolate cake, coffee, and caramel.
There you go. Dan
Yeah.
is a Scotch drinker.
No, I'm just not an idiot like Jake. Well, I'm tasting something never.
I love how
no
you
one's ever
defended so quickly being called a Scotch drinker.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with rye. Dan, I like this rye, but I'm not a rye drinker.
Yeah.
I don't. I have more Scotch than I have rye in my house.
No, you don't.
I do. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bottles of Scotch and 3 bottles of rye.
Are they all Whiskey Acres rye?
No, only one is a Whiskey Acres rye. And it's a barrel pick from Not Your Store. Boom. Boom. That
I've never done a barrel pick of Whiskey
Shots
Acres rye, so
fired. Shots fired.
Right.
No, you're good, John. All the hate's going towards Jake.
Yeah, let's move on.
we're moving on. Well, first off, this one is also $129.99, so it follows the rule of $10 a year. And yes, we do have 3 bottles in stock.
Well, Jake just bought one, so probably 2.
He's gonna buy one.
Yeah.
The Craig Alecky, the one that I said slaps.
Yeah.
That's delicate.
Dan, go ahead and launch
Yeah,
into
Dan.
that one since you like it the best.
My notes on this one is like right off the bat, it's Speyside. Like right away could tell. I am just gonna say that if you're not a Scotch drinker like me and you want to compare this to something, I would say this is like the Weller of Scotches. Just a nice, smooth, easy drinker. Nice flavor profile, well-rounded. Nothing really, to me, stood out and like gave me anything crazy. Just a smooth, in the words of our old friend Roberto, it would be a great Netflix Scotch.
Yeah.
Netflix and chill Scotch.
Also, a bit more smoke and peat than what we've tasted so far. Which, yeah, surprising that you like it so much, Dan. But it still has that like rich, full body kind of sweetness up front, and then it kind of leads into a little bit of that smoky, peaty.
Yeah, and like, Josh, you were talking about, how you guys focus on texture and stuff, and
Yeah, this one
usually
is...
that's not one of the things that I think about, but trying all 5 of these, it's like very apparent that that's
Yeah.
a criteria for you guys. These are like all very like maple syrupy, kind of like thick and like rich. So they're all like such a pleasant experience to drink, and it's just so flavorful. On top of that, it's
That's
really
awesome.
really well selected.
Yeah, thank you. It's the one thing that we hang our hat on, that we have to have at all time. So I appreciate that. Jake, the other Jake, I like that you got the smoke in there, because we got it too. The interesting thing is, and we put it on the flavometer. If there's one dot on the flavometer, that means that doesn't exist in that particular category. Like a 1 is really 0, and 10 is, well, that's just maximum. It doesn't
That's
go
good,
to
because
11.
if you had like 7 as a maximum, on a scale of 1 to 10, it'd be really hard to read.
But we got 2 on the smoke here, and Kregeliki doesn't use peated malt at all. So there isn't. So whether it's barrel char or something coming through, something's given it a smokiness that it was enough to where we had to say, like, you should expect something there.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
almost like toasty. It's not like, it's definitely not peaty.
Yeah, I usually will use the term peat, and it's much less often that I use the term smoke when describing a scotch. But this one, for sure, like, that was what stood out to me, like kind of like almost like if you smoked an old fashioned, like that kind of smoke.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's like a hardwood smoke almost.
Yeah. Yeah, this was my Thanksgiving whiskey. This is what I put out. Well, that and wild turkey, of course. You have to put that out. But yeah, this just seems like this warms you up from the inside out. Like, this is sitting next to a fire, hanging out with friends and family, and just having a good time. Like, that's what this whiskey is for me.
And I'm guessing all of these still carry through some of the original things that you guys talked about at the beginning, with being kosher and everything, with the Easter season not too far around the corner now at this point.
So we don't certify kosher
Okay.
at all. We stay far away from it.
Yeah, I don't know where you got that from, Dan.
He said earlier.
Yeah, so I apologize if I either misspoke or misled. The name of the company was Jewish Single Malt Whiskey Society. And that's what we were going to be calling our bottling company. We changed it to Single Cask Nation.
Gotcha.
But the reason why distilleries were interested in us is they thought that if we had bottled it, we would get the attention of the Jewish drinker. But we had to let them know, like, we don't kosher certify. We won't kosher certify. A, we don't think it needs it, but B, we also respect people who feel it does, right? It's like, if the whiskey's matured in a bourbon barrel, it's like, can be made kosher, can be certified kosher. If it's matured in a wine or a sherry cask, it can't, right? And there was just too many ins and outs. We thought, rather than get into the business of that, put all of the cask details on the bottling and let people make their own informed decision, and at least ensure that, at least 50% of ours would be kosher by nature.
Gotcha.
Rather than naughty by nature. So people didn't have to.
These guys are too
worry
young
about
to understand what that reference is,
They're
unfortunately.
not down with NNP?
They're not.
What?
No,
Oh my gosh.
they're too young.
Yeah, Dan's got a good 10 years on us, so.
Dan's an old man.
Old man.
Yeah, so did that answer your question fully?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I was trying to get you some more sales for Passover season coming up. But,
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I will say that Passover is a different story.
Okay.
Passover is very different because I'm Passover and I don't keep kosher, but I keep kosher for Passover, which simply means I can't have anything that is grain-based, and all whiskey is grain-based. So we're actually really lucky. We're good friends with the people at Thornton Distillery in Illinois, and they make a kosher for Passover rum. And we've bottled a single cask from them, I think, every year for the past 3 years. And so we're looking at bottling another kosher for Passover rum by them for Passover. So
You got a chance to try their peated single malts that they've been doing lately?
Ari tasted me last year on some 2-year-old stuff. Thought it was awesome. I loved where it was going.
It was interesting. I was with him a few times this summer, so.
Yeah, nice.
We'll have to
What have
check
you
that
tasted
out.
from him on that?
They had 4 or 5 on bottles that were just under the table, and I was
Gotcha.
at the
Okay.
booth right beside them, so it was just kind of the under the table pours.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, good people.
But
Hey, well, we're
Well.
coming up on time.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else, Josh, that you want to talk about?
Yeah, just 2 other things. The guys who made the Water of Life film are about to release a 4-part miniseries called Independent Spirits. It originally was going to be a feature film, feature documentary. They changed it to 4-part miniseries, and it's all about independent bottlers. And we are in it. We're in episode 3, apparently. And so if you dig whiskey, first check out Water of Life film. It's awesome. And if you dug that, please check this out. If you like independent bottling in general or just curious about it, need to know more, I think it's going to be a great series. And is it like uncool for me to mention my podcast on your podcast?
Plug
No, okay.
away.
Go
Plug
ahead.
away,
Okay.
whatever you want to plug. Yeah, where can
So
we find
Jason and I, and also our third partner Jess joins us occasionally. We have a podcast called One Nation Under Whiskey. We're about to start our 9th season, but it's every other week where we talk to distillers, producers, blenders, bottlers, musicians, comedians, actors, all over whiskey, and we get geeky. It's kind of like the Car Talk version of whiskey podcasts. If you're too young for Car Talk, it does exist on the internet. But just easygoing conversations about whiskeys. We get geeky, and there's a few dick jokes every now and again. So that's it. One Nation Under Whiskey.
you got me hooked, so.
Yeah.
What else, though? Where can they find Single Cask Nation on social
right.
media?
I'm so bad at
where
this
else?
stuff. I really appreciate it. So I know that you can find Single Cask Nation bottlings at Gold Eagle. That's
yeah,
what I'm
we
told.
know to only look for them at Gold Eagle, but
Yeah, only. But obviously there's the internet, singlecasknation.com. You can check us out there. We are on Instagram. We are not on Twitter or X. We're not on X.
It's X, yeah.
Is it
Truth?
X?
Truth Social?
You don't think we're on Truth?
Dan,
Okay.
you said we
We're
weren't
not on
going
Blue
there.
Sky either. So we're not. We don't get on any. They're all cesspools. No, we hang out where people don't argue over petty things. So that's us. I mean, if you want to know where we're going to be, Instagram for sure. You can check us out. We list where we will be. We'll list when we're having live podcast events because we do take them around, and they're usually held at distilleries. And most of our information can be found there on the podcast. And yeah, go to singlecasknation.com. You can just sign up. We'll start sending you emails. We won't spam you. We send an email a week. We'll let you know what's new, what's going on. We do have website exclusives. Like that Kosher for Passover rum will be a website exclusive. Our wild turkeys were website exclusives and so on. So yeah, I think that's it. I think
All right.
that's everywhere we are.
Jake, with if people want to listen to our podcast to hear this, to then go to their podcast, where can they find our podcast at? Where can they see what we're doing?
You can watch us on Spotify and YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or any other podcast platform. Check us out on Instagram at Bourbon Matters, Facebook as well. That's it, right?
Jake, you have a coupon code that you
I
teased earlier.
I do. We're gonna do BMSCN. So just 5 letters, BMSCN. Bourbon Matters, Single Cask Nation. Don't look at me like that, Dan. We can only do 12 characters for our coupon codes.
Yeah, let's make a verbal coupon the most difficult to understand one possible.
I think that's pretty easy. I'll repeat it again. BMSCN will get you 10% off any Single Cask Nation bottle that we have at Gold Eagle. Must be used online, not valid if any items are already on sale. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Follow us on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. And I am 100% looking forward to and excited about bringing more of these bottlings in. So hopefully we get some more interest around them. And you'll continue to see cool and different bottlings coming into the store.
Awesome.
But
Josh, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you for
Josh.
telling us your story and picking out these great whiskeys. These are actually really, really good from somebody that doesn't drink scotch that often. So,
and also really good
that's
from
about the-
people that like scotch.
yeah.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun talking to you guys. Hopefully I didn't get too geeky and prattle on too much.
No,
that's
not
great.
I've talked about corn for 25 minutes straight on this podcast, so you're still good. So.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll see you guys next week then.
Yep.
Yep. Cheers.
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 Cheers.